I'm back, and it's Tales from the Lot, the first episode of Season 2. Jerry had his game face on. My guest Gary Kerper is here to talk about the infamous 5877 show at Barton Hall, Cornell University. Here we go. Hi, welcome to Tales from the Lot. This is Will. My guest today is Gary Kerper from New York. We're going to be talking about 5877 and whether that show actually happened or not. So, how's it going, Gary?
Good, thanks. How you doing, Will?
I'm doing fantastic. So, where did you come from musically? What were you into growing up, and how did you arrive to this Grateful Dead thing?
Well, in high school, I was mostly into the classic stuff, the Beatles, the Stones, Allman Brothers, really big, Zeppelin, Dylan, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and the Dead were kind of they were kind of like underground. They weren't that popular, especially with the people I was hanging out with.
Interesting. Yeah, and these days they're all that whole circle. You can't really say without mentioning the Grateful Dead. So that's cool. So you had some friends into it that said, "Hey, you should come check this thing out," or how did that work?
No, actually, it was freshman year in college,
Mm-hmm.
and meeting new people, and we were hanging out with one guy who had older brothers and sisters who had seen the Dead at Roosevelt Stadium in '72 and '73 and '74, and he was playing Europe '72 constantly. So we were hanging out in this guy's room, and he was playing that, and we were like, "This sounds pretty good,
Yeah,
really good."
no doubt.
So, so that was like my first real introduction to the Dead. Although backtracking, when I was in camp,
Mm-hmm.
when I was 11 years old in 1970, in that summer, my counselors were playing Working Man's Dead. So I vividly remember them playing Uncle John's Band. That was like my first introduction, but it didn't really sink in back then. And it was a
Right. Yeah,
pretty cool song back then, but I didn't really, absorb it and understand,
it was kind of the seed that was planted that sprouted later.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. And so you're in college, and people obviously, they were a big college thing through the 70s, 80s, and on into the 90s. And so, where did you first see them at?
Well, no, Cornell was my first show.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Cornell was my
Oh,
first show. So
wow.
we were listening to the Europe '72, and I think someone else had Skeletons from the Closet, and
Hmm.
but then we had different people, listening to Bob Marley. We had one group listening to Aerosmith, one group listening to Boston, one group listening to Hendrix and Al Di Meola. So everybody had their own, musical influences.
Every one of those is fantastic in that era, though. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you could frown upon Aerosmith these days, but back then they were a pretty solid band.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So then it was the spring, and it was like school was ending, and the one guy who had the older brothers and sisters, he said, "You're not going to believe it. The Dead are playing at Cornell on Sunday, like the 2 days after school was ending,
Wow.
and let's go." So I'm like, "Okay, let's do it." I wasn't rushing to go home to like a job or something like that. It was
Hmm.
my freshman year of college. I don't
Right.
even know if I was working, if I had a job.
Yeah, that's not on your radar sometimes at that age.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe I was painting houses or something like that. But
Right.
so we got permission from the school to stay in the dorms over the weekend because the
Oh,
show was Sunday night. So we just kind of squatted in our dorm the Saturday and the Sunday, and we went up to Cornell on. I forgot who got the tickets. I personally didn't get them. I think my buddy got them,
hmm,
and we went up there on at noon on Sunday for the show
got
with
it. I
about six or
looked
eight
it up on.
guys.
Gotcha. I looked it up on DeadNet, just to see if there were notes and other comments on there, and they had the price listed as 750. So,
Yeah,
so evidently it was sub $8 to go see the Grateful Dead in those days, which is kind of cool. And And here I was bitching in 92 and 93 of spending $25. You know,
Yeah, it's all
uh,
relative. Inflation
it
for
is.
sure.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. It's in, yeah. Still going. So yeah. So cool. So you got the tickets and that's awesome. They let you spend the night in the dorms and
Yeah, so we went up there
leading
like
up
at
to that.
noon. We went up there early and we just hung out. So the Barton Hall is this big airplane kind of hangar, and
Okay.
we went up there and there were three sets of doors on like the south end of the hall where they were letting people in, and
Hmm.
some people had slept out overnight. I guess they came from Boston from the night before, or they just were just
Oh yeah.
whatever. They were there when we got there at noon. We were like, whoa, these people are here already. We thought we'd
Yeah.
be the first people there, but there was some people in front of each door. Not a lot, but there was some.
Yeah.
And
If you
then
were
we
at
did,
that Boston show, there's no doubt you were going to go to the next one because that was a hot one too. You
yeah, it
know.
was, it was.
Yeah. And so
So
yeah, there's a bunch of people there already, huh?
not that many, but then as the afternoon got going, more and more people started milling around in the plaza there, and then by like 5 o'clock, there was a lot. There was a few. There was a
Hmm.
few thousand there. So we had gone to the bathroom, I think, earlier, and then we were like, we better not go anywhere. We better stay by the doors.
Right.
And
Right.
what's that?
General mission.
Yeah, it was general admission for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it's like it started out as a pretty nice day, and now it's around 5:30, 6 o'clock, and the clouds start rolling in, and it starts drizzling, and it starts getting a little breezy and chilly,
Hmm.
and we're getting cold. And now it's like, when are they going to open up the doors? And then finally, they opened up the doors, and they had these big blue garbage cans, like on each side of the door, to try to funnel the people in,
Gotcha.
somewhat organized. But let
Hmm.
me tell you, Will, when they opened up the doors, the set of doors that I was in front of, all hell broke loose. It was like a free for all. People were jumping over the garbage cans,
Oh.
to try to get in first. And then there
Hmm.
was like, the animal instinct in you takes over. You just want to get in as fast as you can.
Right.
It's like the competitive nature, and you just want, okay, is this how we're going to do this? Let's get in fast. So finally, when they opened the doors, there was a short flight of steps, and I just beelined it right for the front. So I was right smack in the front against the stage,
Oh.
basically.
Wow. Nice. So you
Yeah,
were one of those getting horribly smashed.
no doubt, no doubt.
Very cool. So, wow. So, okay. So outside, I didn't start going to the '90s, and we know what Shakedown turned into. What was the outside scene like at that time? I mean, were
It was
were people
pretty
making grilled
relaxed.
cheeses, or what was going on?
No, there was no, not really. It was just people just hanging around, and people were mostly friendly, and yeah, there was no tailgating scene. I know this is Tales from the Lot, but this story is more from Tales from the Front.
Oh yeah, 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 no doubt. I was just curious because and when that happened, I mean, you saw a few shows from then to till the end, and so what do
More
you
than a
remember
few.
about when the commercial shakedown flip was?
I don't know. I mean, I started. Of course, I saw a lot of the shows in the East. In New
Hmm.
Haven and Hartford and Nassau Coliseum and Brendan Byrne Arena. I think just and then I think once they started filling up the arenas, people started just setting up camps outside in the
Yeah,
parking lot, and and then as it got bigger and bigger, you can buy sandwiches and buy shirts and buy pretty much everything outside in the parking
yeah.
lot.
Once there's enough people there, there's somebody's going to realize it's a market.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Saratoga.
That makes
I
sense.
listened. I listened to the tales from a lot from the guy who went to Saratoga. Yeah, I was there
Uh-huh.
too. Not in
Yeah,
'83. I went '84, '85, and '88 to Saratoga. Yeah,
gotcha.
that was a great place.
Yeah. Okay, so you're front row at the greatest Grateful Dead show ever. Like, so Can I ask your state of being in
I was,
at the time?
I was pretty coherent.
Yeah,
I was pretty coherent. They were
cool.
passing around joints, and I was pretty coherent. Except what happened was some people had passed around some bad stuff, and people were like just passing out, right, like
Hmm.
on the floor. So that's why Bob
Oh,
Weir's looking down with wonderment, saying, "What are you guys doing down there? You're supposed to be enjoying yourself, not passing out."
yeah,
And but they kept playing, and I was just looking up, right. Jerry had his game face on, and it was mind-boggling. I didn't even know half the songs, frankly, because they weren't all on Europe 72. you
yeah,
know
yeah. There was I'm trying to think what like they love each other might have been Jack Straw.
yeah, well, Jack
No,
Straw's out on Europe 72, but They Love Each Other, songs like that I didn't really know.
yeah.
And Road Jimmy and Lazy Lightning, but it all sounded great. And then they did the dancing in the streets, and
Oh,
the place was just rocking, and we were just holding on for
nice.
dear life, and we knew whatever they were doing, it was good. It was really good.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely a special night. So the first set, yeah, there's no slacks there, but once that Scarlet Fire comes, I mean, like everybody, I'm sure knew that this was a special night because that was, I mean, man, that was killer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was phenomenal. And then when you listen to it now on the tape, it's just pure magic, every note. But the
Yeah.
cool thing was, before they went into the Saint Stephen jam,
Hmm.
they huddled up for like at least 5 minutes discussing they would do in the game plan, what they were going to play, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And, they were all like discussing which medley they were going to do,
Nice.
and it was it was just ridiculous. It was just Jerry was right in front. I was right smack in the front when Jerry did One More Saturday Night at the end, when he just did, went wild.
Hmm.
He jumped 6 inches off the ground. I didn't know he had I didn't know he had those kind of springs in his feet, but he jumped at the end. I mean, they were definitely psyched.
Right. And so, okay, so of that night, for me listening back to it, maybe it would be the morning dew or something, but what was the moment when you decided, that night that this was for you and you were probably going to do this some more?
I mean, it was, I was very impressionable. I'm 18 years old, and it was like, I was into all kinds of other music, and pretty much open minded. It was just wow. And then I
Hmm.
got out of the show, and it was snowing. You probably heard the stories. There was like 3 inches of snow on the ground. There was the whole night was crazy. But after I left the show the next day, I have two younger brothers. So my middle brother, I said, "You can't believe this concert that I saw. It was unbelievable. It was Grateful. You can't believe it. It was unbelievable how good they were."
Hmm.
So I was started listening to some of the tapes. I had an 8-track player, actually, in my
Hmm.
dad's old Mercury Cougar. So I had Great American Music Hall. I had a few random shows on 8 tracks. I'm not sure how I recorded them, but I had them on 8 track, and I just was listening. I had Europe 72, so I was listening over and over, and just learning more of the words. And then my brother actually went to Englishtown for his first show,
Uh-huh.
and he was out of him and all his friends were just like, what happened? They were in shock, just like I was after Cornell. They were in utter shock. So then you start listening to the music, and then when I went back to school in the fall, I met some guys who were trading tapes. There was one guy who I met at Cornell, who I drove back to campus. He turned out to be like one of the first tape traders on campus. This guy Rick Sullivan. He lives in Vermont now, and I just spoke to him the other day. He was making he had tapes. So this is
Wow.
fall of '77, and I'm walking by his dorm room, and he's playing Winterland 3/1977. I'm like, wow, that sounds good. Where's that from? And he
Hmm.
had Springfield '77. He had a bunch of live tapes.
Wow.
So then it just kind of snowballs.
Hmm. Okay, so yeah, they didn't have taper section. Then you just kind of. I mean, did they care that you were taping the venue people, or do you know anything about how that was being handled back then?
There were some people taping the Cornell show. There were some people.
Hmm.
And then my second show was Colgate 11-4, and there were definitely a few people taping that show.
Okay, and if you saw it, they probably weren't hassling them too much. Then
Not at
that's
all.
yeah,
Not at
yeah,
all.
that's cool. Yeah, I was curious how that was all handled back then.
Yeah, I think it was pretty lax. I don't think they, I think people snuck them in,
Yeah,
but I don't think they cared much.
yeah.
And then
Glad they did.
Colgate was another show. Yeah, thank God. And then Colgate was unbelievable because one of my friends who had gone to Cornell, his brother was going to Colgate. And he said, guys, you're not going to believe it. My brother just called. The Dead just announced the show on Tuesday. They're playing Friday at Colgate in the gymnasium. We're like, okay, get tickets. So he got tickets. I think they might have been $5. Seriously, with his Geo card. And so we drove to Colgate, which was like I don't know, an hour drive, an hour and a half drive from Ithaca, and it was in the gymnasium. Will, I don't know how big your high school gymnasium was, but this place was smaller than my high school gymnasium. And we
Oh
walked in
wow.
like a little like one of those doors that you push in, like
Hmm.
and 10 feet in front of the stage for Colgate, and it was just like,
Wow.
and they just blew the doors out for that one.
Right. Are you a Donna fan?
Not a huge Donna fan, but I appreciate her, and when I listen, yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
she's fine with me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with
Um,
you. She's of that era. It fits in with it and just makes it. Without it, it would certainly be different.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I'm good with Donna.
yeah, I'm fine.
It's better than Yoko. You know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How many did you make it to overall? Like how many dead shows did you see?
I would say about 105.
Wow.
I tailed off in the 90s. In,
Hmm.
in the 90s, I tailed off. I started, but I was pretty consistent. I was seeing a couple of shows in the spring, a couple of shows in the fall. My brother moved to California, so I went out there. I saw New Year's in '88. I saw him at the Greek Theater in '87, Sacramento, Cal Expo, and I went down to Irvine. I saw them there a couple of nights. But I wasn't like if I was like a hardcore traveler, I would have probably seen 300. But I had a job. I was a responsible deadhead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You work to get to go to those shows. I was I was at some show. I don't remember what it was, but some guy just. I was at Red Rocks, and he stands up and he turns around and yells to everybody up the way, "This is why we work!" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, you're kind of right." The guy was having the time of his life for sure. I can't remember what it was, like J Rad or something. It was funny. And then so okay, so you saw them all through the '80s and everything. What are some of the standouts? I mean, obviously this first one, it's tough to top that one. But what are some of your standouts or any cool stories you have from
Well,
any of the shows you
well, I
saw?
would say Rochester 11-5-77 was unbelievable. We
Yeah.
went up there, and it was like that Ohio scene where all those people got crushed to death at the like a Who concert or something like that.
Uh huh.
I mean, I got lifted off my feet and like carried into that place. It was nuts because it was cold outside, and they finally opened the doors. All the ticker takers scattered, and we just got like blown in. It was dangerous. I
Yeah.
was like
Sounds like
peeling my
yeah.
leg off with one of the turnstiles.
Yikes.
And then it was general admission, so the whole floor, we were just off the floor, pretty close to the
Hmm.
stage. It was right,
Right.
we were a perfect spot, but the floor
Hmm.
was just back and forth. It was a sea of people, and you hear Jerry saying, people are getting horribly smashed, and have mercy, on these, because just a sea of people. It was pretty crazy, and that show was just high octane from the beginning. It was amazing.
Well, yeah, that's when they were really causing a frenzy. the Dead were.
That was a standout. The New Haven one that I went to in '78, May 10th, 1978, unbelievable. The place was just shaking. Jerry was out of control that night. I would say 11179 stands out.
Mm-hmm.
I went to those two. I was home for a mid college break in early January, Christmas, and I went to see them January 10th, where they broke out the Dark Star. But the next night, I thought was the next night I was out of control. It was that show was unbelievable. 11179. Listen to the audience tape on re-listen. It's unreal.
I'm gonna write it down.
Yeah,
Try to check it out.
that one I was in altered state. That might have had something to do with it, but it was
Got it.
pretty amazing.
I'll give it a spin. So okay, so back to 5877. You've heard or seen the theory on the internet that some lunatic made up, obviously. But it's so ridiculous. But I read it today just because it's been a few years since I read it. It's still hilarious as it ever was about CIA testing and all right, I just got to take a minute and read this crazy shit that's been floating around on the internet forever about this Cornell show. So here we go. I understand why most people think that 5877 was as real as can be. It's widely considered to be the holy grail of Grateful Dead shows. And if it was an actual real show, it would be just that. But the fact is that it was a hoax perpetrated through a joint effort of the U.S. Department of Defense and the CIA. And this is nothing new. My uncle served in NAM with one of the guys that were actually in the CIA experiment. Hell, if you don't believe me, it's even on the archive. Okay, so I'm not sure what archive he's talking about here, but I'll continue. There's been a lot of talk lately about the legendary fake show of 5877, and I've kept my silence on the subject for 22 years. Now it's finally time to come clean on the whole subject. The whole idea began back in late 69 or early 1970. The Department of Defense and the CIA were very disappointed by the way the Vietnam War was progressing. Not only were we losing, but more importantly, the U.S. public did not approve of the war and worse yet, weren't believing anything the military said about what was happening. This was an unprecedented event. Any other recent war was viewed positively by the public, or at least with apathy in the case of Korea. Something had to be done. They decided to take a page from the Soviets and experiment with mind control. Together with Disney and a fledgling computer company called Microsoft, they set out to prove that brainwashing could really work on the very people who opposed them, the hippies. It isn't widely known, but Cornell was actually the second test of these mind control procedures. The first occurred in mid-1975 and was a dismal failure. Two major mistakes were made. First, they picked the one time that the Dead were not touring, and this created all sorts of problems with the subject audience. The more serious mistake was in not updating the criteria of this experiment. Due to typical government inefficiency, they used the 1969 version of the Dead that was playing when the program was conceived. The sudden appearance of Pigpen, who had died 2 years earlier, literally blew the minds of those in attendance. 6 months were spent erasing all traces of the show and carefully rebuilding as much of their minds as possible. The subjects were eventually released, and most of them became evangelists, their only lingering memory of the whole experiment being an unshakable belief that they had witnessed a true miracle. Unfortunately, no tapes have been found from this first experiment. That's a real shame because the version of Dark Star St. Stephen 11 Love Light that they used was supposedly the best ever. After a few drinks, the original scientists still speak in awe about the music they heard that day. By November 1976, everyone was ready for the second test. This time, they learned from their mistakes. A small group of college students were hired to attend shows from 1976 through 1977. Our job was to collect tapes of Dead performances, select which tunes to use, and to help identify subjects for the upcoming experiment. The location and date were chosen with equal care. It was an off day during the tour and the location close enough to the real concerts to be believed. Of more importance was the late snowfall that day. That unusual and easily confirmed event provided the glue that would hold the implanted memories together. Even now, 22 years later, people remembering that concert use identical words to describe leaving the show. Overall, the experiment was a great success. Of course, some people were given slightly different memories. Some, like Teddy Goodbear, remember taping the show and were even provided audience tapes to further cement the hoax.
Still, others remember getting horribly smashed up front. None of this actually occurred. A week after the concert experiment, a second test was done on the town of Cornell itself. In order to perfect this hoax, the town itself must also be convinced that the concert took place. Disney had acquired ownership of all the local TV and radio stations through dummy corporations. Using special chips developed by Microsoft, they played subliminal messages to every man, woman, and child in a 100-mile radius of Barton Hall. For the most part, this programming still holds today, although some people did prove resistant to the message. As far as the source of the music, for the most part, the list posted by Brew Ziggins is correct. The only mystery remaining is the Scarlet Fire. That was actually performed by the Dead specifically for this experiment. Since Jerry worked for the CIA, it was easy to convince him and the rest of the band to go along. Plus, he liked the idea of pranking a large group of people like this. The fabled 2677 Take a Step Back rehearsal tape is also from material tape for these experiments. So just a quick note about Bruce Ziggins that was mentioned there. This person has posted a list of all the songs from the Cornell show and the corresponding actual show that that song was taken from. I did notice the Scarlet Fire does not have an alternate date listed, so as the story here says, that one was made specifically for the show. So I'll continue here. The soundboard tapes in circulation were leaked by Betty O'Connell, who edited the original tapes. I don't know if it was just a coincidence or not, but they were leaked at about the same time as the tapes recorded by Betty Cantor were found. In any event, they became part of the so-called Betty boards. Leaking these tapes also provided the first cracks in the hoax to appear, since the tapes were distributed to people who were not in the experiment and who knew that no show was performed that day. It was necessary to obtain their silence through blackmail, bribery, and in extreme cases, mind control itself. That's also how the show came to be listed in all the popular Dead show guides like Deadbase. So, what's happened to these mind control techniques used in the experiment? Microsoft has used this power to become one of the biggest, most influential companies in history. They sure didn't become that big by providing quality products. It was used to shape public reaction to the Gulf War. It's also clear that George Bush never understood the full power of these methods. There are also indications that this technology might explain the otherwise unbelievable popularity of rap music. That's the whole story. Okay, so that's the end. Take it for what it's worth. It's a good laugh for me. Let's get back to Gary.
I'm living proof that it really happened, that the show happened.
Yeah. They've actually got a whole list of the whole set list and where each of the songs came from, and if you listen, some of them are actually kind of close, but it's obviously not the right ones, and I don't know, it just makes it all the more funny, I think, that somebody really took the time, and then I was dumb enough to go listen to see.
Yeah, no, I'm living proof that it really did happen.
Nice. So, all right. So, and then 80s, you saw some West Coast shows and.
Yeah, I would say the Greek Theater in 87. My brother was living in Berkeley, went over there. The Watchtower show, the second day, it was like a 5:00 start, and they broke out the Watchtower in the second set, and we were just like, the whole place was like a swirl. We didn't know what hit us. It was like a hurricane came through, and then everybody walked out after the show, and it was like, what was that? It was like really a hurricane hit. And I walked out. I'll never forget. I'm walking down the steps. Everybody's spilling out on that University Avenue in Berkeley. Mm-hmm. And I said to my brother, I said, was that Jerry or was that Hendrix? And some guy, back then I was like 30 at the time. Some guy said, who was like 60, who was like my age, he said, I don't know, but I'll be back tomorrow to find out.
Yeah, well put. Yeah, he just, man, Jerry could just rip sometimes, like. And sometimes it's in the most subtle of places. It's like in the middle of Mexicali when Bob's singing, he'll just be like doing the most crazy stuff that's, to just knock you out,
Yeah, I was listening to some of the recommendations from some of your other podcasts for a couple of these 90s shows. I listened to that one where Vince's first show where they did that bird song. I was like, wow, because I don't listen to much of the recent stuff at all. I listen to just mostly 70s tapes
Right.
and shows, and I was like, whoa, that was great.
Yeah. There's I can't, it may have been that one, but there was one where they were just starting to use the MIDI stuff, and like, wow, it opened up a whole new palette for everybody, and it allowed them to keep progressing and changing, and but which I don't know, which surprises me about Dead and Company. Like, I feel like in the spirit of the Dead, they should keep progressing and writing new songs, but they do what they want to do. I'm not the manager of Dead and Company.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not Bobby. Do you see those guys at all?
I haven't seen Dead and Company. I just kind of avoid, City Field or big venues, but I do go see Dark
Mm-hmm.
Star Orchestra.
Right.
Really like Jeff Mattson, and
Mm-hmm.
I've seen J Rad
Right.
a few times, but I prefer Dark Star Orchestra. I really like. I mean, and the last time we saw them, it was the best I've seen them. They really killed it.
Yeah,
So I enjoy
I
that.
haven't seen them for a few years. I'm in a band here in Colorado. We were lucky enough to open for them at State Bridge
Hmm.
Amphitheater here in Colorado. It was really cool. That's the last time I've seen them. But I did see, and I need to listen to it, that Bobby played with them a couple of weeks ago in San Francisco, I think it was.
Hmm.
Um, and I've been wanting to check that out, but I haven't yet, just to see how that went. But yeah, they're great guys, and I really enjoyed every time I've seen them, for
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
I like John Mayer, and I just don't want to go. I just don't want to go to a big venue like that, the City Field for the concert.
Yeah. Yeah.
Avoid big crowds. I'm going to
Yeah,
see
I get it.
Wilco. I'm going to see
For sure.
Wilco at the United Palace in Manhattan in a couple of months. I do like that band. That band's really good.
Cool. Yeah. I see Fish sometimes here at Dick's when they come through, and I get to I go out to Red Rocks quite a bit and just see random acts from, like, I saw Crosby, Stills and Nash a few years ago, and like Chic was awesome dance party, and Trey comes through there sometimes, and all kinds of people. So I live pretty close to that, but I don't get to huge shows too often. There's not a lot of those huge bands that I like these days. Like, I'm not gonna go see. I don't even know who,
You
but
too.
yeah, you too, probably not, or anything like that. Maybe Springsteen. I might go see Springsteen if he came through. But that'd be
Yeah,
about it,
yeah. He doesn't leave anything out. He doesn't leave anything behind for sure.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah. What else do you see? Wilco. Who else do you see? What are you into these days?
Really into Richard Thompson. I don't know if you know him, the English folk guitarist. I'm a big Richard Thompson fan. I like
Hmm.
this jam band called Donna the Buffalo. They happen
Yes,
to be from upstate New York,
I have heard them.
but, but somewhat limited. I mean, I would see
Yeah.
Springsteen for sure if I get
For sure.
if I can get tickets.
Right. Yeah. No doubt. They'd be $500 probably. So. Uh,
Probably. I actually saw
but yeah.
Springsteen at Barton Hall.
Oh yeah.
I think in '78, probably in '78. Yeah, the next year. Yeah, he played it in Barton Hall.
So that's
Wasn't
the
quite
the
the Dead,
wild
but it
and
was good.
the wild and the something in the innocent tour or something. What is that album?
No, I
Is that
think
right?
it was. I think it was. It's escaping me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was good, whatever it was. I'm sure.
yeah.
You
No, it
can't
was.
beat
It
late
was.
'70s
It was.
Springsteen. Yeah, that's awesome. So okay, so like to wrap these things up with like a recommendation, whether it's like a book or a TV show or something that you think that people out there would enjoy. It's an album, or what's something that's changed your life besides the Grateful Dead, or made an impact or made you think.
Well, I'm a pretty big reader. I just read two books that were really well written. One is An Ugly Truth about Facebook,
Hmm.
about just how they really focus on ad revenue as not so much on internet security. That
Right.
was a really well written book. I recommend that. And then I read the book on the Sacklers and the opioid fiasco
From Purdue
called
Pharma.
The Empire of Pain.
Okay.
That was unbelievable book. really well written and really a really sad, state of affairs, as you know. And I just read
Yeah.
today where I think they have to pay like $6 billion. I mean, they made billions, but
Right. And both of those kind of come back to the same thing, about ads and revenue and profits and whatever it
greed.
takes. Yeah, whatever it
A
takes.
lot of greed in society these days, for sure.
Yeah, and as we're seeing in the news today, as a matter of fact. But awesome. All right, Gary, thank you. It's pretty amazing. I think we have some proof that 5877 actually happened. We have somebody who was actually there. I appreciate you coming on and talking about it.
No problem. My pleasure. I have a few other witnesses if you need like another.
Have him give me a call. I'd love to have him on the show.
I got a couple of people to vouch for me.
Awesome.
I did
All
want I
right.
did want to I did want to do one shout out,
Sure.
because in some of your podcasts, you talk about the relationships that you develop.
Right.
Back in the I guess the late '70s, early '80s, they had ads in the back of the Golden Road and Relics where you can start trading tapes. So
Hmm.
someone who I became friends with back then through tape trading, who I still communicate with regularly today, Brian O'Connell. He was living in Chicago, so he was my tape connection in Chicago,
Uh-huh.
and we're the same age. And he saw all the Uptown Theater shows in Chicago. He saw all the Alpine Valley shows. Now he moved to Florida, but he happens to play in a band as well. But we've been friends for whatever 40 years, and you know he used to he started burning me CDs when everything switched over to CDs. But back in the day, he
Hmm.
was spinning cassettes, Maxell tapes, and sending them out. It was so you develop these
Nice.
relationships. Insane, really
Yeah, yeah,
insane.
yeah. And I've said it before that this band has that power to change your life and yeah, form those kind of relationships. Speaking of those Maxells, where'd it go? I was going to show you. I was just going through something the other day and found some old tapes. Do you remember those points where you like send in your points to get Maxell tapes? Like,
Vaguely, yes,
like
yes,
yeah, you get like 10 points per cassette or something like that. You put them all in
yes.
the paper and send them in, and they'd send you 10 tapes. Yeah, I came across one. It was the other day. It was like, yes,
You can still
that was
cash
not.
them in, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was wondering, where do I send these now to get my? Maybe they'll send me CDs now or something. Who knows? Awesome. All right, Gary, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Will.